Good morning and welcome here this morning. My name is Lauren and I'm part of the speaking team here. If you haven't had a chance to meet yet, it is so great to be here together online on this beautiful Sunday morning. Gary continues to heal, and thank you so much for your ongoing support. Well, I'm really glad to be together specifically this morning because we're starting a brand new series called Calm in the Psalms, where we're going to actually be exploring one of the most raw and real and honest, vulnerable parts of the Bible. Each week for the month of May, we're going to be kind of exploring one of our favorite Psalms, that's been instrumental in providing us with calm and strength. The book of Psalms was written a long time ago, a couple millennia ago, by some really ordinary people who had a way of just honestly and really poetically expressing their process of navigating life circumstances and God when things just didn't make sense. Well, after high school, I moved to a very small town, isolated, away from family. And there was this one woman, she was about 2 years older than me, had moved there just a little bit before I did. And we had a couple of conversations that immediately made me want to spend more time with her, to get to know her better. She was fun, relaxed, and unfortunately she didn't have a lot of time, which is a real drag because I was so desperate to talk to someone who hadn't grown up in that little place, who had had some outside experience. It just didn't work out that way. Have you ever experienced that, where you want to have a closer relationship with someone, but they just don't? They keep their distance. Maybe they're just not available, or worse, maybe they're even cold and dismissive. Maybe it's with a colleague at work. Do you remember that? Like a few weeks ago when we used to kind of sit around together and as humans we'd kind of be in the lunchroom together? Or maybe your story is more like you want to be closer with your teen kids or your adult kids and they just aren't letting you in. Or maybe it's with a spouse. You want to be closer again. You want that relationship to be relaxed and where you can joke and talk together about stuff in a way like you used to. But instead, you're feeling distant and disconnected, and worse, your spouse has kind of checked out, isn't engaged. Well, if you haven't experienced this vulnerable sensation yet in your life, you probably will, where you really, really want a relationship to progress, but the other person is just not going to go there with you. Well, there's an overarching thread, in the whole biblical narrative, that's really captured succinctly in a very small part of a letter, and it's actually in the very end of the Bible. I want to read these words for you, and they're Jesus talking. He says this, "Behold, I'm standing at the door knocking. If your heart is open to hear my voice, and you open the door within, I will come into you and feast with you, and you will feast with me." This imagery kind of captures, what is subtly woven through the entire God story. It's from beginning to end. These specific words, though, were written to a group of ancient Christians, real people like you and me. They were really good people, according, to all accounts. They were good neighbors. They paid their taxes. They were good employees, great business owners, members of the community. They volunteered. They served, maybe at church. But this imagery gets even more powerful when we look at the Jewish wedding tradition that it's actually alluding to. In the days of Jesus, prior to a wedding, the groom and his father, would go to the door of the bride-to-be. In their hand would be a goblet of wine to be shared. It was this symbol, an invitation to deepening the relationship. Standing outside, the groom would knock and wait. If the beloved woman inside this door opened it wide, she was essentially saying, "Yes, I will be your bride. Yes, I want to have the most intimate relationship with you. I choose you too." Okay, so I am a sucker for, romantic stories, but this is better than your average romantic gesture. This is a staggering image of the God of creation, God himself standing in such vulnerability, taking the risk, putting himself and his wishes out there for all to see, knocking, waiting, hoping. He's hoping that the very person that he loves will want the relationship too. It's quite a different image, from the one that many of us grew up with, or we assumed at some point, an image of God as this strong authoritarian, person who really doesn't care that much about how things affect us personally. After all, he made the wind and the volcanoes and the waves. It's pretty obvious he has the power to pretty much do whatever he wants. And yet, here, God is depicted as a vulnerable, rejectable, sensitive lover. And the one thing he cannot do is make anyone choose him, love him. For the entire story of humankind, from the very beginning, it's us, you and me, the individual people that God created, who have the choice to respond when love reaches out to us. The biblical story is that God has taken the first steps toward us. As a matter of fact, he continuously takes the next steps toward us. He's bridged the gap, smoothed the way. He's sacrificed more than any of us will probably ever understand and comprehend to become one of us in the story of Jesus. So we get this invite into a relationship with our Creator. And here's what we've done with it, more often than not. Instead of that relationship with God, characterized by intimacy and openness and vulnerability, we've opted for religious activity, sometimes just straight called religion. And if we get really honest, we look a little deeper at this religious activity, we recognize that it's actually a really effective distancing mechanism. It keeps us apart. We can treat God, our higher power, with respect, and we can be polite and sometimes maybe even fearful. And doing things just right becomes a formula. Thinking, along the lines of, if I do all these things, A, B, C, that God will do what I want, X, Y, Z. I have spent plenty of years of my own life, in the empty pursuit of doing things just right, to keep myself, to keep God, to keep others hopefully satisfied, with my performance. And it's just dang exhausting. It's an energy suck, and it's like smoke and mirrors because it never ends. There's no relief. The satisfaction I'm craving has never come from that. But if we're honest and we take a look with some compassion on how we got here, it's kind of revealing. There's been an element for each of us of our very survival that's linked to us figuring out the right formula from the time that we were really young. We've become really adept at trying to get our own needs met since childhood, by figuring out what works and what doesn't work. We learn quickly, even as babies and children, that behaving in certain ways gets predictable results. And it's easier, honestly, when you're looking at this, to see other people's formula that they're using to try to get what they need. Like when you see a kid whining, you're in the store, or maybe the kid's full on having a tantrum to try to get what they want. The reason they do that is because it works. And by the time we get to school, when we're with another, a group of other small humans, we've already figured out how to get our needs met in pretty creative ways. Whatever they are, they're effective. So early on as a kid, I figured out that the good girl formula worked for me. So did my tummy hurts. I actually had real aches. The whining formula didn't work in my house. But I figured out quickly what did work, to get the love and attention that I needed. And then as I got older, I used that formula to get friends at school, to get the good grades, to keep people from asking the right questions, just showing the part of me that I wanted them to see and omitting the part I didn't. It goes on and on. Some of my friends found that the reverse formula works just as well. Misbehavior or doing things, in rebellion. It works well to get, our needs met. It's just the flip side. You can see how it's super easy for us to assume the very same patterns that we've developed as children that have been really effective for us, of pretzeling ourselves into whatever shape we needed to be. And we subconsciously continue to do that with God as well, through all of the religious activities and the things that, we think we need to do. We do it with our human relationships, and of course, then we do it with God. We believe we're going to get the desired results, so we just keep going. And you know what? This is pretty universal. It actually doesn't even matter if you consider yourself to be spiritual or otherwise. It shows up across the board. For church people, the formula might go something like this. Go to church, read your Bible, say your prayers, check, check. If you're Catholic, it might include things like going to confession or say your Hail Marys, check, check. If you're Buddhist, it might be that you're focusing on meditation or embracing the discomfort of life, in a chill kind of way. Check. If you're Muslim, you follow the 5 pillars of Islam. Check. If you're spiritual, you might check in with your spirit guides and follow as best you can. Check, check. If you're a secularist, an atheist agnostic, you do your best to be a good citizen and to find value in other things, your pursuits and hobbies. Check. And no matter what your stripes are, though, when you mess up, you pay the price with lots of guilt. Double check, check. Here's what's really fascinating. God did not create you and me. The concept in his mind when he made people at the very beginning and when he made you, right, in this modern time, was not for us to robotically follow a bunch of rules or checklists to be distant and respectful. He wanted something so much more real and raw and honest. He wants the same thing that our hearts long for as well, but we're often just too dang scared to allow the life-giving relationship that comes on the other side of vulnerability. According to modern science, there's actually 3 requirements for having that, that contribute to having a life-giving relationship, or also known as an intimate relationship. And we're not talking about the physical aspects of intimacy here, but we're talking about being fully known and loved for who you really are. The first requirement is time. It's essential, but it also gets squished out in our super fast-paced lives. Author Susan Scott, she wrote the book Fierce Conversation. She says something really powerful, that the conversation is the relationship. It's powerful. Conversations take time. You and I can only experience intimacy when we actually talk to someone, when we listen. Not once a month, not once in a while, but regularly, multiple times a day. Intimacy requires a day-to-day conscious commitment. The second requirement, of course, kind of goes right along with that, is vulnerability. Deeply sharing your feelings, your joys, oh my Lord, your disappointments, your dreams, what you aspire to, your fails, your limitations, and even just the fact that you feel vulnerable. Being emotionally naked is essential. And there's no other way for you to really know to your heart that you actually are loved for who you really are. The third the third thing that you need to have for this intimate relationship is to mutually prioritize each other. In the Bible, this is sometimes called honoring each other. Consistently putting the needs of other people this person that you value, putting their desires, their needs ahead of yours, advocating for their fulfillment. And when both people do this, that is love. That is where safety exists. So in the coming weeks, we are going to be looking at the book of Psalms. There's 150 of them, which is a sweet thing because that means that over, every calendar year, you can read them through twice if you want. They are raw and they're honest. They're emotional and they're real. This might be why, for people today and throughout history, including me, there's this affinity with those, short poetic writings. The authors weren't politically correct, they were not polite. They simply opened up the window for us to identify in our experiences that God is still here with us, no matter how messy or joyful or confusing or painful our lives are at any moment. Listen to these words from Psalm 91. Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust him. The psalm goes on to share in great detail how God will protect those who live while trusting. And this is what I feel every time I read it. It's really important to notice, though, that there's this assumed intimacy in this, and in many of the Psalms. There's an openness to God allowing him to be close. Because as much as this outlines that God is here and available to protect us and allow us to be sheltered and safe, we can keep that as far away as we want through keeping him out there, knocking on the door. And the thing that's interesting about this whole thing is it's not a one-time, knock, 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 come on in, I want to be close. I find that after 30 years of being in this journey with God, there's still parts of my heart that keep him at a distance, that he's still inviting, and I'm being invited to allow him in places newly all the time. So what's so fun about this is it's a lifelong journey. The imagery continues here in Psalm 91. He will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are armor and protection. And can you get that picture that he's inside with you and the armor and protection are outside both of you? There's safety in this place. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. When they call on me, I will answer. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue and honor them. I will reward them with a long life and give them my salvation. During the last few weeks, with my family under one roof, my work has been full of conversations with hurting people, with scared people, and I've really noticed that I've had to make some adjustments. I've needed to make more priority for self-care for my own self, more intentional time, quiet, slow time with God, in order to keep my gratitude and my joy. And there's been many, many times in my life when I've really felt the most raw, that reading the Psalms, particularly, this Psalm 91, I found it particularly comforting because it captures really how completely safe I am when I'm willing to be vulnerable and allow him to be close to me. I can feel God's relentless invitation for me to just step out of my busy distraction, the stuff that keeps him at a distance and honestly keeps others at a distance too, and allows me to step into that closeness with him, fully sheltered, protected and loved and cherished and safe. And I just find that is often for me, it is a daily, minutely, hourly decision. to stay in that place with him. Actually, not just stay in it, to come back to it. Most of the time, I leave it all the time. I actually have to come back. And in the coming weeks, several of our team, will be exploring, how their favorite psalm has helped them during this recent time. And each week, what we do during these messages, we create some reflection questions that you can use to just help you take some quiet time and maybe ask some questions around what we talk about here on Sunday and kind of let it sink in a little more. You can do it yourself. You can meet up with a friend. You can't meet up, can you? You can talk to them on the phone. You can do video chat. And there's a couple places you can find these questions. If you go to the app, the TMP app, you can download if you don't have it, and you go to this Sunday, you click on coffee questions. Those are posted by Tuesday every week. You can check it out there. But going forward, you can also go to YouTube and watch any of the messages that happen here on a Sunday morning. And you can listen to the message, and all the questions are actually posted below that. So feel free to use that as a great resource to kind of help you dial things back in. And also, during our services this month, you might want to grab a pen, because you might want to write down some of the favorite psalms that people are sharing. And even like right now in the chat, if you have a favorite psalm, write it down. Even if you don't even know the reference, write down, the phrase that you cling to. And, as people are sharing, write them down. And maybe this week, take some time to read more of Psalm 91. Read some of the psalms coming up that people will be sharing. And see if, like me, you're comforted. And maybe you will find that your desire to be fully seen and loved is actually echoed in these ancient words from others, who have traded in their religious activity and the things that they're doing that are keeping God, the most loving person in the universe, and have kept him from that intimacy with you. I invite you to pray with me. God, thank you so much that you understand with such compassion our propensity to kind of just keep you and everyone at a distance. There's certain parts of ourselves that we are willing to share now and again, but how very quickly we retreat again into what we consider safety, and yet it's so very lonely. And we just pray that each one of us, wherever we're at in our journey with you, or even considering, opening that door to you, that you would invite us, or that we would hear, more importantly, that invitation that you are consistently giving us to come to know you. Not know about you like you're over there, but come to know you in such a real way. Thank you that you have for eternity been relentlessly inviting us to let you in. And we just pray that you'd keep showing us that. Don't give up on us. And thank you that you're here with us, and that at any time of day or night, we can say yes to you in another way, in a new way, and that just is a continuous part of the journey that you invite us into. Thank you for that. Thank you that you're with us right here, right now. In Jesus' name, amen.